The bar door swung open into November cold, and Elliot Marsden carried Margot Ellsworth across the sidewalk like a man carrying something he was not supposed to be holding. Her head rested on his shoulder, her heels dragged. In the truck, she said his name twice, soft, the way she had never said it in 7 weeks of nodding at him in a lobby. Her wallet held no address. Her phone was dead. One number worked. Mom. He drove the dark road to the edge of Bend. Beatrice Ellsworth opened the door at 11, looked at her daughter against his shoulder and said, "So you're the man she pretends to hate." He didn't understand. 7 weeks earlier, none of it had begun yet. If you've ever loved someone you swore you didn't, stay with this one. It's quiet at first. It doesn't stay that way. Elliot Marsden woke at 5:30 in the morning the way he had woken every morning for 4 years. Coffee first, ground the night before. The kettle on the back burner that whistled before it screamed. Pancakes second. Hazel third, padding into the kitchen in mismatched socks, hair still flat from the pillow. The small round face of a child who had not yet decided whether she was awake. "There was a squirrel on the cedar yesterday," she said, climbing onto her stool. He had something in his mouth. What kind of something? Maybe an acorn. Maybe a piece of bread. Bend squirrels have options. She considered that seriously and reached for the syrup. He cut her pancakes into eighths because that was the way she liked them. He poured her milk in the small blue cup. He ate standing at the counter, watching her, the way he had stood and watched her eat breakfast every morning for 4 years. By 7:15 he had walked her into Westside Elementary, kissed the top of her head, and watched her disappear into a hallway of children half her seriousness. By 7:30 he was parked in the lot behind Cascade Center, lacing his work boots in the cab of his Ford. By 7:40 he was in the basement of the building with a clipboard, checking the boiler logs and the elevator service records, and the long list of small failures. A downtown commercial tower hides from the people who walk through its lobby every day. Island Lodge Group occupied the 6th and 7th floors, 14 boutique hotels across the Pacific Northwest, 58 executive staff, a single CEO named Margot Ellsworth, and a coffee cup she brought with her every morning at 7:45 sharp. She wore gray most days. She had 2 suits, one charcoal and one slate, and she rotated them with a discipline that suggested she had stopped paying attention to clothing years ago. She nodded at him on her way to the elevator. She had nodded at him every morning for 7 weeks. She had never spoken to him beyond that nod. On Thursday of the 2nd week, the variable air volume box on the 6th floor failed in the middle of a strategy meeting. The conference room climbed 3 degrees. Elliot came up with a tool bag and a stepladder, found the box, replaced the actuator, and stood on the ladder long enough to confirm the airflow was steady again. Margot watched from the doorway of the conference room. He did not rush. He did not apologize. He did not perform the small smile maintenance men learned to perform around executives. "Thank you, Mr. Marsden," she said when he climbed down. "You're welcome, Miss Ellsworth." Her eyes stayed on him a second longer than they needed to. 3:30 that afternoon, Hazel sat at the front desk with her library copy of Charlotte's Web. Brenda, the receptionist, slid her a butter cookie from the small tin she kept under the counter. Hazel read with her mouth slightly open, the way she read everything, and her father came up out of the basement with grease on his knuckles and asked her how Wilbur was doing. "He's worried," Hazel said. "Pigs usually are." She laughed without looking up from the page. At 4:15, Conrad Wayland walked into the lobby with 2 men in tailored coats. He did not look at Elliot. Elliot held the elevator door open with the flat of his hand, and Conrad stepped in without acknowledging him. The doors closed. Elliot watched the floor indicator climb. He did not know Conrad Wayland. He knew the type. The next morning, Conrad called an emergency board meeting on the 7th floor. He spoke for 11 minutes about market position and the inevitability of consolidation and the $340 million offer Meridian Hospitality had put on the table. He spoke about shareholder value the way some men spoke about weather, as if it were something that simply was, something no reasonable person would argue with. Margot listened with her hands flat on the table. She had built the company from a single property in Hood River in 2013. She had taken it from 1 hotel to 14 in 9 years. She had never missed an earnings target. "I built this company," she said when he was done, "and the board is grateful," Conrad said. "But the board also has fiduciary obligations. You're the CEO. The decision to sell is ours. You're the chairman, Conrad, not the board. I have the votes, Margot." She knew the count before she walked into the room. 4-3. She had 3. She left through the stairwell because she did not want her staff to see her face in the elevator. On the landing between 6 and 7, Elliot was on a step stool replacing a fluorescent tube. He saw her come down. He didn't ask what was wrong. He didn't ask anything. He held the old tube in one hand and the new one in the other and said, "The one on 7 is flickering too. I'll get it after lunch." She nodded. She did not trust her voice. She walked past him in the step stool, and as she passed, she caught the smell of him, faint and not at all what she would have predicted, soap and cedar shavings and the cold metal of work tools. She kept going. The stairwell door closed behind her on the 6th floor with a soft hydraulic hiss. She made it to her office and closed her own door before her hands started to shake. She sat at her desk for 10 minutes before she could open her laptop. That night, after Hazel was asleep, Elliot opened his laptop at the kitchen table. The email from Preston Hale had come in at 6. Meridian Hospitality is expanding aggressively in the Pacific Northwest. They are in late-stage diligence on a regional chain called Highland Lodge Group, based in Bend. You need to know the source of capital. The general partner behind Meridian's hospitality fund is Halberd Capital Partners. Your founder's veto on Halberd's fund-level decisions is still in force. They don't appear to know you're in Bend. Elliot read it twice. He closed the laptop. The kitchen window showed the dark outline of the cedar Hazel watched in the mornings. He had walked away from Halberd 4 years ago. He had sold most of his stake. He had buried the part of his life that wore a tie. What he had not done, because Preston had advised against it and because he had not, in the end, been able to do it, was give up his founder's veto. The legal architecture of the fund still had his fingerprints on it. The company that was about to swallow Margot Ellsworth's life work was being financed by the firm he had built in a glass office on Federal Street with 3 other men, 2 of whom were still partners, one of whom had spoken at his wife's funeral. He sat at the kitchen table for a long time without moving. The clock on the microwave changed from 10:11 to 10:32 before he closed the laptop. If this story is pulling you in, the small thing you can do right now is hit subscribe. We tell the rest of it in the quiet. The next morning, Margot did not nod at him in the lobby. She walked past with her coffee and her phone, and her eyes fixed on the elevator doors. He noticed. He did not respond. He nodded the same nod he had nodded for 7 weeks, even though no one received it, and he went down to the basement to finish the inventory on the spare ballasts. What he did not know, because he could not have known, was that the reason she had stopped nodding was the stairwell. She had almost spoken to him there. She had almost said something to a man who fixed lights for a living, and the almost had frightened her more than the board meeting. She had been alone for 5 years on purpose. Her last relationship had ended on a Tuesday in March, when a man she had liked enough told her she was easier to admire than to love. She had not argued. She did not intend to stop being alone because a maintenance man told her about a flickering bulb on 7. She built a wall that morning. He felt it. He respected it. He did not test it. He did not ask Brenda what had changed. He went on doing his job the way he had done it for 9 months. Which was the way he had learned to do everything since his wife died, which was to assume people had reasons, and to leave them their reasons. Conrad moved the next piece on Monday. He introduced Declan Rourke to the executive floor as the interim chief operating officer, brought in to support the transition and shore up operational rigor during a period of strategic review. The phrase, strategic review, did most of the work. It implied a process Margot had not initiated and could not stop. Declan was 38, blonde, polite, in the way men trained at the right schools learned to be polite. Margot understood within 30 seconds. Declan was Conrad's replacement for her, installed early, smiling at the right moments, taking notes in the right meetings. The corporate governance documents allowed the board to appoint C-level officers. She could not refuse him without filing a formal objection that would have been read, correctly, as panic. Declan extended a hand. Looking forward to it, Margot. Miss Ellsworth, she said, and shook his hand once. That afternoon, Elliot brought a replacement keycard for the 7th floor server room up to her office. Protocol required the CEO to sign for it directly. She signed. He handed her the card. Their hands touched for half a second, and she did not pull hers back. He noted that. He did not show that he noted it. She set the card on the desk between them and did not look at it. Anything else, Miss Ellsworth? No. Thank you. Have a good day, Miss Ellsworth. Mr. Marston. He left. That night he called Preston Hale from the back porch with the door closed, so Hazel would not hear. Does Halberd actually need my signature to close the Meridian deal? Your veto is intact. They can try to route around it commercially, but if you exercise it, the transaction freezes for 90 days minimum. Enough time for the target to defend itself. I'm not doing anything. You're watching. I'm watching. Preston was quiet for a moment. The line carried the sound of his office in Boston, the late hum of a building that had not yet learned it was empty. Who is she? Elliot. He didn't answer. He hung up. Hazel sat at the front desk on Wednesday with her book open to the page where Charlotte begins to weave words into her web. Margot came down from the 7th floor on her way to a meeting at a property in Sisters, and stopped, because she could not help stopping. That was my favorite, when I was your age. Hazel looked up. My mom read it to me. Before, Margot understood what before meant. She did not ask. She sat down on the bench next to the front desk for 1 minute, and they talked about Wilbur and about Charlotte and about whether spiders were really friends or just very patient. Hazel said spiders were both. Margot smiled, a real smile, for the first time in 2 weeks. Elliot came around the corner with a coil of low-voltage cable over his shoulder and stopped at the edge of the lobby. He watched. He did not walk into the scene. He nodded at Brenda. Brenda nodded back. He went down to the basement without his daughter seeing him. That night at home, over pasta, Hazel said, "The lady on the 6th floor is sad, Dad. She smiles wrong." What does smiling wrong look like, Bug? Like when you have to do it, not when you want to. Elliot didn't answer. He cleared the plates. He thought about a coffee cup. The next morning he asked Brenda, quietly, if she would set a black Americano from the kiosk in the lobby on Miss Ellsworth's desk before she came in. Brenda did not ask why. She had worked the desk for 11 years. She did not need to ask. The cup was there on Friday morning when Margot opened her office door. She stopped. She picked it up. She did not need to ask Brenda either, but she asked anyway, and Brenda told her with the small smile of a woman who had decided to be on a particular side. Margot drank it. She did not thank him. He brought one Monday too, and Tuesday, and every weekday after that, without a note, without a name on the cup, without ever once mentioning it in the lobby. Conrad escalated. A travel blog in Eugene ran a piece on Wednesday about Highland Lodge being in strategic transition. A second blog out of Portland picked it up by Thursday. By Friday, a group booking at the property in Cannon Beach pulled out and rebooked with a competitor. Margot walked into Conrad's office without knocking. "You leaked this. I'm protecting shareholder value, Margot. Your emotional attachment to this company is the problem, not me." Declan was at the side table taking notes. He did not look up. She walked out. She sat in her office in the dark at 8 at night and looked at the coffee cup from that morning, the 5th one of the week, the rim worn soft from her mouth. She had known it was Elliot from the second day. She had never said so. She drank from it anyway. She stood up and walked to the window. In the parking lot below, Elliot was lifting Hazel into the cab of his truck. The child was sleepy, head against his shoulder. He buckled her in with one hand. He closed the door without slamming it. He drove out of the lot without looking up at the building. Margot turned away from the window. The fire alarm on the 6th floor went off at 8:40 Thursday night. A sensor in the ceiling near the conference room had failed. Margot was still at her desk, going through 12 months of financial filings, looking for the line item that would let her argue back at Conrad with numbers instead of feeling. Elliot was on the evening rotation, which he worked twice a week to make the household budget come out right. Mrs. Vance from across the hall watched Hazel on those nights for $40 and a casserole on Sundays. He came up. He reset the panel. He brought the stepladder from the supply closet on 6 and pulled the sensor from the ceiling tile. He worked under the white emergency lights that the alarm trip had triggered, which made everything look the wrong color. A pale clinical blue that flattened faces. She stood in the doorway of the conference room and watched. "All good," he said when he climbed down. "False positive. The board's old. I'll order a replacement set in the morning." She did not move from the doorway. She did not know why, she asked. The lights had come back to normal, but she did not move. "How old is she?" "Your daughter, 8. Going on 28 some days. She told me her mother read Charlotte's Web to her." He stopped packing his tools for a beat. He folded the broken sensor into his palm and looked at it instead of looking at her. She did. Every night for the last year, we were on the chapter where Charlotte begins to fail when she passed. The silence held for 20 seconds. Neither of them filled it. He picked up the bag. He stopped at the door. "You shouldn't be here this late, Miss Ellsworth." "Neither should you," he nodded. "Small. Fair." He left. Conrad's next move was structural. The following Tuesday, he requested an internal audit of every financial decision Margot had made in the last 12 months. Framed as routine due diligence for the Meridian transaction, the audit committee had 4 members. 3 of them were his. The audit was not an audit. It was a paper trail being built against her, slowly, on company stationery, by people she had hired. She sat in her office and read the engagement letter twice. The language was clean. The intent was not. She forwarded it to Carla Soto, the outside counsel Highland Lodge retained for non-routine matters, with a single line in the body of the email. They are building a case to remove me. That night, in her apartment, she poured a half glass of red wine she did not finish, sat on the couch in the dark, and called her mother for the first time in 3 weeks. Mom, am I losing? Losing what, honey? She did not answer. Beatrice waited. The silence between them was the kind of silence that mothers know how to hold. Then, gently, get some sleep. Come for breakfast Saturday. Margot hung up. She set the phone face down on the counter. She did not cry. She did not move for several minutes. Saturday morning, Margot met with Carla Soto, the lawyer Highland Lodge retained for non-routine corporate matters, at a quiet office on Bond Street downtown. Carla had spent 2 days tracing the capital behind Meridian. She slid a printed organizational chart across the table. It's a fund of funds structure. The deal sponsor is Meridian Hospitality, but the equity comes from a vehicle managed by Halberd Capital Partners out of Boston. They're the general partner. That's as deep as I can go without a court order. Halberd is privately held. The partners don't disclose. Margot studied the chart. Halberd sat at the top of the diagram in a small rectangle. 3 names were listed under it as managing partners. None of them were Elliot Marsden. And the founders? 4 founders in 2009. 3 current. 1 walked away 4 years ago. Records are sealed. Margot wrote Halberd Capital on her notepad. She underlined it once. The name meant nothing to her. On Tuesday, Declan Rourke came down to the basement of Cascade Center under the pretext of inspecting the server room. He found Elliot in the mechanical room behind the boiler, with the inspection light on and the cover off the secondary pump. He stopped 2 meters away. He waited until Elliot looked up. Elliot Marsden. I sat at the back of the room when you closed the Pemberton deal in 2015. You spoke for 30 minutes without notes. I never forgot the face. Elliot wiped his hands on a shop rag. He looked at Declan steadily. He did not look surprised. He had known this moment would come from the day he saw Declan walk out of the elevator on 6. You've got the wrong man. I don't. The question is what you're doing here, and what happens if I tell Conrad? Elliot folded the rag in half and set it on the workbench. Tell him whatever you want. Declan studied him. He had expected a flinch. He had expected the look of a man who was hiding. He saw instead the look of a man who had already chosen what he would do if his name came up. Declan calculated, the way men like Declan always calculated, and decided that the information was worth more held than spent. If he handed it to Conrad now, Conrad would burn it loud and burn it fast. If he held it, he had leverage on 2 sides. He nodded once. All right, Elliot. He left. That night, Elliot called Preston. Declan Rourke recognized me. Prepare the veto filing. I'm not activating it yet. I activate when she chooses. Chooses what? Whether she wants me in this. It's her company. It's not mine to save. Elliot, prepare the filing. Preston. He hung up. He sat in the cab of the truck in the Cascade Center parking lot at 9:30 that night. The light on the 6th floor was still on. He could see the silhouette of her, just barely, moving past the window of the conference room. He knew she was up there alone. He knew he had the only weapon that could stop what was about to happen to her. He knew that using it meant the end of the 4-year project of being a man who fixed thermostats in a building where no one knew his name. He thought about Hazel, asleep 3 miles away, under a glow-in-the-dark constellation he had stuck to the ceiling himself. He put both hands on the steering wheel. He did not start the truck for 3 minutes. Friday came hard. Conrad sent the formal notice. The board vote on the Meridian transaction would be held in 13 days. Margot read the email at 2 in the afternoon, set the phone face down, and worked through the rest of her meetings without showing anything. She left the office at 7. She drove to The Ridge, a wine bar on Wall Street downtown she used to go to with a friend who had moved away 3 years ago. She still went to the same seat at the bar. She still ordered the same Tempranillo. She had 2 glasses. She had 3. She had 4. By 10:30 her phone was dead and her body had finished negotiating with the wine. Elliot walked into the Ridge at 10:40 to pick up a takeout order. Hazel was at home with Mrs. Vance, the neighbor who watched her on the 2 evenings a week he worked the second shift. He had ordered ahead. He came up to the bar to pay. Russ, the bartender, was already looking at him. "You know her? She works in your building, right?" Elliot looked over. Margot was at the corner of the bar, forehead resting on the back of her hand, hair falling forward. "Yeah, she's done, man. I was about to call somebody. Sober her up or take her home. I don't want her here at closing." Elliot crossed to the bar. Miss Ellsworth. She lifted her head. It took a second for her to focus. "Mr. Marsden." He set a hand under her elbow. She did not resist. She did not help. She let him stand her up. He paid her tab. He paid for his takeout. He walked her out to the truck. She walked with her hand in the crook of his arm, because she could not walk without it. In the cab he buckled her seatbelt. Her wallet was on the console. He looked through it. No driver's license with a current address. New apartment, she had said once in a board meeting he had overheard while replacing a vent grill. He found a folded business card from Beatrice Ellsworth, retired English teacher, with a home address in pencil on the back and the word Mom underlined twice. He drove east out of downtown, toward the edge of town. "I don't hate you, Elliot." He kept his eyes on the road. "I hate that I think about you when I shouldn't." He didn't answer. His hands tightened on the wheel once and then settled. "You smell like sawdust in coffee." "That's not fair." He didn't answer that either, but the corner of his mouth moved. She did not see it. She was looking at the window glass. He pulled into a driveway at 4 minutes past 11. The porch light came on. He got out, came around to her door, lifted her down. She put her arm over his shoulders. He carried more of her weight than she carried herself. Beatrice Ellsworth opened the door. She looked at Elliot. She looked at her daughter. She did not look surprised. She looked like a woman who had been quietly waiting for a Friday night phone call from a hospital and had received instead a Friday night arrival of something better. "So you're the man she pretends to hate." He stood in the porch light, holding her daughter against his shoulder. "Ma'am, she complains about you. 3 times a week for 2 months. The cold one, the maintenance man with the daughter, the one who fixes the lights too slowly, the one who fixes them too fast. No one complains that much about someone they aren't thinking about." He didn't have anything to say to that. She held the door open. "Bring her in." He carried Margot to the couch in the living room. Beatrice brought a blanket. He laid her down and arranged the blanket over her shoulders. He took her shoes off and set them next to the couch. "Coffee, Mr. Marsden?" "No. Thank you, ma'am. She wouldn't want me here when she wakes up." Beatrice studied him the way mothers study men in porch light. "Drive safe, Mr. Marsden." "Yes, ma'am." He left. Saturday morning, Margot woke on her mother's couch, with a head she did not want, and a mouth tasting of red wine and shame. The sunlight came in flat through the front window. Beatrice was already at the kitchen table reading the local paper. She brought tea without being asked. "Mom, he carried you in. He wouldn't sit down. He called you Miss Ellsworth even after you were unconscious. He took your shoes off. He set them by the couch. He apologized for the inconvenience." "Mom, please. You said things in the truck, honey." I asked. "He told me. He didn't want to. I made him." Margot closed her eyes. "You don't owe him anything," Beatrice said. "But you owe yourself the truth about why you're angry at him. You've been angry at him for 2 months and he has done nothing to you, Margot. Nothing. That's not anger. That's something else." Margot did not answer. She drank the tea. She showered in her mother's small upstairs bathroom. She borrowed a sweater from her mother's closet, the gray one she had worn to her father's funeral 8 years ago. She drove home in the late morning light and sat on her own couch for an hour without moving. She thought about the coffee cup on her desk every morning for 9 days. She thought about her shoes set neatly next to the couch. She thought about the words she had said in the cab of his truck, and what it meant that he had not used them against her. Monday morning she walked into Cascade Center with her shoulders set. The elevator doors opened. Elliot was inside, tool bag at his feet. On his way out to the parts store, he saw her. He held the door. He did not step out. She stepped in. The doors closed. 1st floor to 6th floor. He did not look at her. He did not mention Friday. He did not perform sympathy or distance or any of the small theaters men perform after they have seen a woman at her worst. He stood with his tool bag at his feet and his hands at his sides and let her have the silence she needed. The doors opened at 6. "Have a good day, Miss Ellsworth." She nodded. She stepped out. In her office, the Americano was on her desk. She picked it up. She drank from it. For the first time, she was not drinking it alone. At noon, a third travel blog ran a piece. It quoted an unnamed source inside Highland Lodge, describing the CEO's recent public display of impaired judgment at a downtown Bend establishment. No name, enough detail that every board member would recognize her. Margot read the piece in her office with the door closed. She understood. Declan had been at the Ridge on Friday on purpose. She picked up the internal phone. She dialed the basement. Marsden. It's Margot. He was quiet for a half-second. Margot, thank you. For Friday, you don't owe me anything. My name is Margot. I want you to use it. He took a breath. Margot. She hung up before she could say anything else. Her hand stayed on the phone for a long time after. That afternoon, Conrad accelerated the vote. The board meeting was moved from the following Thursday to this Thursday. 3 days. She had not built the coalition. She would not build it in 3 days. Wednesday night, she sat in her office at 7:30, counted votes one more time, and made a decision she had not planned to make. She picked up the internal phone. Marsden, can you come up to 7? He came up. She closed the office door behind him. She did not sit. She did not invite him to sit. Highland Lodge is being sold tomorrow. I don't have the votes. I'm not asking you for anything. I wanted you to know I fought. He looked at her. His face did not change. He took the chair across from her desk anyway. He spoke quietly. Margot, there's something I need to tell you before you walk into that meeting tomorrow. She waited. I was a founding partner at a private equity firm in Boston, Halberd Capital Partners. We started it in 2009. By 2021, I had a wife who was dying and a daughter who was 4 years old, and I sold most of my stake and walked away. We moved here. I kept one thing, a founder's veto on fund-level decisions. Preston Hale, my old counsel, still holds it for me. She did not interrupt. The capital behind Meridian Hospitality is Halberd's Hospitality Fund. If I exercise the veto, the transaction freezes for 90 days. It gives you time to organize a defense, to recapitalize, to remove Conrad through a shareholder vote. It doesn't save you. It gives you the room to save yourself. She sat down slowly. How long have you known? Since the night Conrad called the first meeting. 6 weeks. 6 weeks. It wasn't mine to use. It's your company. I came to this town to be a maintenance man and raise my daughter. I left that world for a reason. I didn't want to drag you into a decision you didn't choose. She was quiet for a long time. He waited. Why now? Because you deserve to know you have the choice before you lose. Not after. She looked at the window. She looked at the desk. She looked at him. Activated. He took out his phone. He called Preston. The filing went out at 8:12. Thursday morning, the board meeting opened at 10. Conrad sat at the head of the table, the Meridian term sheet in front of him, the smile of a man with 4 votes already in his pocket. He began the procedural opening. At 10:06, the door opened. Preston Hale walked in. 3-piece suit. Leather portfolio. He set a single document in the center of the table. On behalf of Halberd Capital Partners, founding partner Elliot Marsden, this is formal notice of the exercise of the founder's veto on fund-level transaction approvals. Meridian Hospitality's acquisition of Highland Lodge Group is suspended for 90 days as of 8:12 last night. Conrad picked up the document. He read it. He read the name twice. Elliot Marsden. He looked across the table at Declan in the corner. Declan's face went still in a particular way. Conrad understood what the stillness meant. Preston left without sitting down. In the 90 days that followed, Margot did not work miracles. She worked the phones. She flew to 4 cities. She met with 3 institutional shareholders Conrad had assumed were aligned with him and showed them the audit pattern, the leaks to the travel blogs, the timeline of the COO appointment. By day 60, she had 31% of the shareholder base prepared to vote with her at a special meeting. By day 78, she had 38%. By day 84, Conrad understood he was going to lose the chairmanship in an open vote, and he resigned to preserve his consulting income from a Meridian advisory role that no longer mattered. Declan submitted his resignation the same week, citing personal reasons. 3 months after the night at the Ridge, Margot walked across the Cascade Center parking lot at 4 in the afternoon and found Elliot in the cab of his truck with the window down, waiting for Hazel to come out of an art class on the 2nd floor. She leaned against the door of the truck. She was wearing a sweater and jeans. She had not worn a suit on a weekday in 4 weeks. You didn't go back to Boston? No. Hazel likes her school. Do you regret leaving the firm? He thought about it. No. I regret a lot of things. That isn't one of them. She was quiet. The wind moved the leaves of the maple at the edge of the lot. You could have stopped it from the first week. It wasn't mine to stop. She nodded slowly. She understood. She had needed to understand it on her own. Hazel told me you make the best grilled cheese in Oregon. His mouth moved at the corner. She said that? She said a lot of things. Kids don't pretend. He looked at her. She held it. The door of the building opened. Hazel came out carrying a watercolor of a ladybug. She saw Margot. She did not look surprised. She walked up to her father's truck. "Hi, Miss Ellsworth." Margot crouched down to her eye level. "Margot. You can call me Margot." Hazel considered this seriously. She nodded. 2 Saturdays later, Elliot stood at his kitchen counter buttering bread. Hazel sat at the table with 3 plates, arranging the forks, not asking why 3. The doorbell rang. Hazel ran to the door and opened it. Margot stood on the front step in a sweater and jeans. No makeup, hair down. In her hand was a paperback copy of Charlotte's Web. Worn at the corners, the spine creased the way books are creased when a child reads them again and again. It was her copy from 3rd grade. "I thought we could read it together." After lunch, Hazel turned and called back into the house. "Dad." She brought her own copy. Elliot came to the kitchen doorway with a dish towel on his shoulder and a spatula in his right hand. He looked at Margot. She looked at him. 5 seconds passed without either of them speaking. "Come in," he said. "It's cold." She stepped inside. The door closed. On her phone, on the screen she did not check, was a text from her mother. "Have fun, sweetheart. Tell him I said the small things still count." They ate at the kitchen table. Hazel told them about a girl in her class who had brought a chameleon to show and tell, and how the chameleon had refused to change colors no matter what color paper they put it on, which Hazel thought was very on brand for a chameleon. Elliot listened. Margot listened. She did not think about email. She did not think about the board. She did not think about anything she was supposed to be controlling. She ate her grilled cheese and listened to an 8-year-old talk about a squirrel she had seen that morning on the cedar outside her bedroom window. After lunch, Hazel curled up on the couch in the living room with Charlotte's Web, and Margot sat at the other end with her own paperback open on her knee. They took turns reading aloud. Elliot stood in the kitchen doorway with a dish towel still on his shoulder and watched the two of them for a long minute without speaking. Then he came in and sat in the armchair across from the couch. He did not interrupt. He did not perform. He listened to his daughter read in her careful 3rd-grade voice, and to the woman beside her pick up the next paragraph when his daughter slowed. The light came in low through the kitchen window. The afternoon held.